What's going on, everybody? We are back with the Real Bodybuilding Podcast, episode number 51. And I am here with my man, Patrick Tour again. For those of you who don't know, Patrick Tour is a well-renowned coach who coaches a lot of the top IFBBs and a lot of amateurs that are coming up, and they all have a pretty amazing look to them. How are you, Patrick?
I'm great. Thank you, Fouad. Thank you for having me.
Before we started, Patrick asked me how my diet was going, and it's going really good. I don't look like the guys you trained, but it's weird. Go ahead.
Sorry, you just have to learn to use Instagram better. It's just a matter of, lights, Photoshop.
Yeah, you learn better angles. Yeah. No, I'm really happy with the way things are going though, because I was off after my surgery. Kind of like my diet was really shit, my training was really shit for about 9 or 10 months, and I got serious about 4 to 6 weeks ago. And my weight hasn't moved, but I've gotten leaner and everything's kind of filling back out and starting to look like it's my old self a little bit. So, it was tough for a long time. I didn't think it was going to come back. I thought, okay, I'm 41. Maybe my body won't come back to where it's supposed to be. But it looks like every week things get a little better, and I'm still hovering around 280. So
I'm happy. A lot of weight.
Yeah, I'm happy.
That's a lot of weight.
I used to start my preps around 293, 294. So I think I'm a little bit down in size. So my goal is to try and bring my waist in a bit so that the loss of muscle won't look as apparent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think you're going to have a much better muscle maturity. Your muscle's going to look harder. From the pictures that I seen you post on Instagram, that's what you gather. If you compare it to your old self, like your 2011, 12, you were hard, but now you've got a little more vascular, grainy look to it, which makes the skin look thinner even. So I don't think you're going to see a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I've ever really had a big issue with conditioning. And I know what you mean about the graininess. I feel like that'll be there. I'm more concerned with, I have quite a few injuries, so I don't know how everything's going to fit together now, especially the tricep is, when you get a bad surgeon, it's like, even if the tricep is functional, it doesn't look as full and round as it did. So I'm more concerned with how things are going to look when everything's fine.
I didn't see anything on the tricep. Maybe the only thing that I see from the pictures that you post is a little bit less sweep on your quads.
Yeah. I wonder about that. I'm glad you said that. I want to ask you about cardio because, for my entire career, I did the Stairmaster and the step mill. Sorry, not the Stairmaster. And I always felt like it was my go-to. I wouldn't go fast, one or level 2 or 3, and just do about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then that was it. And I was able to keep most of my leg size that way. But this year I decided I would do the bike. And I've been doing the bike for about 35 minutes on a level 8 to 10. So I'm getting a pump. If you're getting a pump in the morning on an empty stomach, I drink my essential aminos, that's it. Am I doing more damage than good, or am I okay?
It depends. It mostly depends on what you're able to eat immediately post your cardio.
Okay.
If you're able to replenish your glycogen that you lose during your cardio very well because you have plenty of carbs, I think it could be even beneficial because you increase the uptake of nutrient uptake because you're using your legs a little harder. Mm-hmm. So you're actually losing a little more glycogen from your muscle. Which you can compensate. But if your first meal after the cardio is really low in carbs or really slow carbs, then maybe over the long run, it could kind of empty it out. It could maybe take some energy out, which you will be missing for your leg workout.
It's funny you said that. Let me ask you this then. So last week, I decided to switch out my oatmeal in the morning. And I started doing rice and honey. Not cream of rice, just regular rice. And I just put a teaspoon of honey on it. And I was doing about 300 grams. And what I noticed was my legs stayed full all week. Is that because normally I would do just 1 cup of oatmeal, which is about 60 grams of carbs. The 300 grams of rice is about 90, plus the honey is 90 to 100.
Yeah.
So I
that makes sense. You would have to see that you don't have many fats in the first meal.
Yeah.
And make sure that the carbs that you use give you a little more of an insulin spike. Mm-hmm. So everything is shuttled in faster.
Yeah.
And if I may give you an advice, I would probably try with jam instead of honey.
Why is that?
Honey is made out of fructose.
Okay.
Honey is mainly fructose, and just usually jam, they add a lot of, just sugar to it.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a little fruit.
Yeah.
So it's just gives you a little stronger glucose push, which is going to your muscle instead of, just plain energy from fructose, which will not be converted into muscle glycogen.
I know this isn't going to make sense, but jam and rice doesn't sound like it tastes good, but honey and rice does.
Rice cakes and jam. Yeah.
Rice cakes.
Yeah, it does.
Rice cakes and jam sounds good. I could do that.
Yeah. I always put honey in my oatmeal in the morning too. I've been doing it for 10 years. It tastes awesome, obviously.
Well,
but just in a matter of insulin output, it's probably the slightly better choice.
One of the other reasons I did it too is I noticed my stomach was a lot flatter when I dropped the oatmeal. Does that make sense? I mean, I know the oatmeal has the fiber in it and it's a little slower digesting, so it would make sense, correct?
Yeah. You probably with 60 grams that you were using, you shouldn't be having any, bloating, because it's a very, very little amount for such a large bodybuilder as you are. So it's but you may be sensitive. Then you also have the gluten with the oats that you don't have with the rice or cream of rice.
Yeah.
Even though many people don't have strong symptoms of gluten tolerances, but those little bloating or slowly digestion can be a symptom that it's still bothering you in some way.
Do you think, I'm going to give you a little bit of bro science here. You can tell me if you think it makes any sense. Do you think after 20 years of eating, because I do talk a lot about bloating on this podcast, do you think that after 20 years of eating a bodybuilding diet, it could cause more sensitivity?
Well, I don't understand your question. Clean.
Well, sorry. I just mean eating massive amounts of food the way we do from age 20 to age 41. Do you think it's taxing on the digestive system? And maybe that's why I have more sensitivities to food than I would have, say, when I was 30.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, that's not even, under debate. Our digestive tract, stomach and intestines, is made to support a certain amount of food for a certain amount of time. And obviously, like every other cell in our body, it ages, the function reduces in quality. Yeah. And obviously, the more you have put in over the last 20 years, maybe like a normal person would do in 40 years, it obviously leaves scars, and you're going to have a harder time with 41 that you do with 20. Absolutely, yes. You have to be much more conservative and listen to your body much more now than you would have, 10, 15 years ago. Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the things I don't like about that is I used to have really good off seasons using a lot of fats, more healthy fats than non. But I feel like fats just don't work well with me anymore. But I can do massive amounts of rice, and I feel like I'm okay. So, is that detrimental, or am I do you think it's okay to do the low fat approach?
I've never used high fats anyway. I'm just using the amount of fats that you need for usual metabolic purposes, not for energy purposes. So I personally don't see a problem with it. Absolutely not.
So what is a measurement of what could somebody say on average? And I know everybody's going to be different, but what is on average like a fat content that somebody would put in their diet in an off season? Are we talking 15 grams per meal or more or less, or?
It really depends on the total amount of calories that you use and your size, obviously. But just the essential fatty acids that you need, you can find probably anywhere from 40 to 70 grams of total extra fats in the days, not counting what you find in your meats and oatmeal, just what you're going to add, in form of avocado or vegetable oils, almond butter, things like that, just nuts. I would say probably average 50 to 60 grams extra would usually do the trick from what I see.
When you create a diet, would you add fats to a meal that already had high fat? Like example, if you were going to have if you told your athlete to eat ground beef and rice or eggs, say eggs and oatmeal, whole eggs, would you add more fat to that meal, or would the egg fat or the beef fat be enough?
It really also depends on what time of the day it is. Like for your first meal, when you really have a lot of carbs, then I would try to keep it more on the lower side and then maybe increase a little bit on the second meal.
Okay.
For your last meal, for example, I usually have different fat sources like yolks from my egg white, almond butter.
Yeah.
Even if you're before your last meal, sometimes I like to use salmon. As you get closer to bedtime, use protein sources that are a little fatter because you are going to reduce the amount of carbs that you use.
Yeah.
So maybe sometimes I would look at the composition of the type of fats that you use. For example, if you use salmon, it's very rich in omega-3 fatty acids. Then I would add some safflower oil, for example, or macadamia nut oil, which is a mainly polysaturated fat, just to compensate the balance in the fatty acids composition.
Okay. What about, and that's kind of the way I used to set up my diets. I would go high carb in the earlier of the day and then taper it off and do the opposite with the fats. But what about, how do you feel about coconut oil? Because when I eat coconut oil, I feel like, and I know it's a medium chain mostly and then a long chain, but I feel like I'm getting my fats, but I don't feel like it's interrupting my stomach in any way, shape, or form. But I also don't feel like it's doing as much, for lack of a better word, as far as like making a meal stick or digest slower.
Yeah,
does that make
absolutely.
sense?
Well, from a nutritional standpoint, you have to see that coconut oil, or if you can use just simple MCT oil, for example, when you're very low in carb, it has an extremely important role because it can really speed up the way your body uses energy.
Okay.
If you don't go overboard, because energy in itself is found in this oil. But I prefer other sources, honestly, than coconut oil. Like I told you, olive oil, really good olive oil source, safflower oil, macadamia nut oil. I just find it to have a better fatty acids profile than just simple coconut oil.
Okay. Because I really liked the coconut oil because I felt like I was getting my fats, but like I said, they weren't interrupting my digestive system at all. But if they're
lighter,
but if they're not doing the job of what I want the fats for, then there's no purpose, right?
Well, if you're trying to find a very good, an optimal fatty acids composition, then coconut oil is probably not your number one option. There are better options than that. But then again, for example, if you have to go really low carb, and that for several days, sometimes weeks, then it makes sense because how it impacts your metabolism differently than a regular fat. So it always depends on the circumstances. It has a reason to be, but for example, in the off season, I would not. That's something I really don't see an advantage in using it, besides the fact that you tolerate it better on an intestinal level. Absolutely.
Okay, so I want to show people, for those people who don't know, I want to show them your clientele here. So this is James, and this is one of the
today.
this is this is today. Okay, yeah. I mean, this is insane, right? He looks absolutely amazing. Yeah. But this is one of the things I am blown away by your coaching style. Most bodybuilders get into a groove where they might come out for a couple of years and you kind of know where they're going to be. They end up kind of staying the same shape or same size, and you kind of know they're going to be like a 5th place guy or a 6th place guy or whatever. James seemed like he kind of found a place where he was going to fit. He was like a top 3 to top 5 guy. And then I see him go to you, and it's not normal to see a guy who's as advanced as James make this dramatic jump into a completely different physique. And I've noticed that you've done that with a few different guys, but I don't feel like, I know the food has a lot to do with it. And I know, I don't think the drugs is anything crazier than any other coach is doing. I almost feel like the training is the reason. And last time you're on the podcast, we talked a lot about nutrition, but we didn't discuss training. Mm-hmm. So I want to show people just a couple guys. So this is Ian. He's competing in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's today.
He's another guy that kind of had built a physique that you kind of thought you were going to see what he was about for the rest of his career, and you kind of took to another level. And then this one blows me away the most.
I just trained with Florian yesterday.
I have always thought his physique was amazing, but it seems like you've added like a couple inches everywhere.
Yeah, and believe me, these pictures really don't do him justice when you see him in real, because he's like 6 feet tall. He really is a sight. I mean, he really looks amazing.
He looks like he's like a top 5 Olympian in these photos.
I would say from the front, he is. He still needs some more development in the back to really be what you just said.
Okay.
But it's coming. He's growing. I mean, he's really getting there.
And this is is this an amateur client?
Yes, he's from Scotland, yes.
So this is his before photo and this is his after?
Yeah, that's the off season he was doing before we started. And then
yeah,
about 12 weeks of work, 9, 10, 12. Yeah, somewhere, I don't remember.
I mean, the lighting's a little different, but his arms look thicker. His chest looks a little thicker. Like everything looks a little bit bigger.
Oh no, he put on a good 10, 12 pounds of lean tissue.
I mean, if you look at the side shots, this hamstring drop is dramatically different.
Yeah.
Arm size. That's great. I mean, this is the kind of thing I've been seeing is just like, you get a hold of these guys and they just like, this is another great physique. And they all kind of have that same look. It's like a very full, round, clean lines. Joe Seaman, another one. Okay. So you guys can go to Patrick Tours. It's P Tour. This is his Instagram. You guys can go follow him there. Check out all his clients and I think you give out some pretty good information on your page, right, Patrick?
When I have time to, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So now that they've seen kind of what you can do, I want to know, I mean, we spoke yesterday originally because you contacted me about my little feud I was having with Greg Doucette and people being in a surplus and how what you said was I was right, but I went about it the wrong way. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get too far into this because me and Greg have kind of squashed the whole thing and he believes what he believes and I believe what I believe. But I just want to know from you and your clientele, can you explain their calories, deficit, surplus, how what you're doing with them and why they're growing the way they're growing?
Yeah. Well, what I was trying to explain to you yesterday by voice message is that you used a mathematical daily energy requirement calculator. The problem is those are set on a standard body. Usually that's how you measure, for example, your BMI, your body mass index.
Yeah.
But you have to understand that a 290-pound bodybuilder cannot be measured with the same standard as a normal person would be weighing 290 pounds, because his body mass index will tell you he probably has 35% body fat.
Yeah.
So if you calculate the way you do, obviously it will give you this incredible amount of extra calories that he would need.
Yeah.
But I was trying to tell you that in reality, it's even more. I mean, you said 1,000 surplus or 1,500 calorie surplus, but if you would use this mathematical daily energy requirement calculator, it's probably double that much, because you have to understand that if for example, you weigh 180 pounds and you want to gain 1 gram of muscle tissue, there's a certain effort that goes into it. If you are 290 pounds and you want to gain 1 gram of muscle tissue, it's a totally different effort. For example, if you want to go from 180 pounds to 200 pounds, a bodybuilder, you know it's a pretty simple task. I mean, you don't really have to go crazy. Now imagine a 290 pound bodybuilder who wants to put on 20 pounds of muscle tissue. Yeah, you're telling me that shit, this is almost impossible task. Yeah. Because the energy requirements would be so great that a human body would not even be able to take in and turn over all that amount of food. It's just in 500 calorie surplus for a 180 pound bodybuilder do not represent the same value as for a 290 pound bodybuilder. Okay. Because now I don't want to get too specific into cell biology, but I will try to make it very simple. Mm-hmm. We have what we call mitochondrial activity. Mitochondria is a part of a cell which produces energy, turns over energy. Now, this activity, this mitochondrial respiration, it's called in biology, with a 290-pound bodybuilder is something crazy. Okay. I mean, in biology, people who make these calculations and do these studies have no idea what this activity would look like.
Yeah,
I've seen it because I've coached bodybuilders. I've been 290 pounds myself. I know how much energy is needed just to keep that type of size. Mm-hmm. So imagine adding new tissue to that amount. Mm-hmm. And cellular metabolism is much, much, much higher in such an individual, because we are talking about large professional bodybuilder. So you cannot compare a 180-pound bodybuilder with a 290-pound bodybuilder. That's like comparing a 100-horsepower car with a 600-horsepower car. Yeah. So actually, the 6,000 calories you guys were talking about a day, that's just needed to stay where you're at, just to keep. So the problem is, at one point, you cannot even eat enough food to sustain your requirements.
But I think that's actually Greg's point. Greg is saying that, and I'm sure he'll correct me if I'm wrong or anything, but I believe what Greg is saying is that somebody Ian's size or Hunter's size, and we'll use Ian since he's your client, needs 5,500 calories just to hold his weight. And if he's going to grow, then he should go 500 calories over, which is kind of where you had him. He said he was eating between 6 and 6,500 calories in the off season.
Look, the truth, I mean, I'm just going to tell you the truth. The truth is, like for James in the off season or Ian, we ate as much food as they possibly could eat.
Okay.
There was no way they could even eat anything more, not even a gram or an ounce of rice more, because that's everything they could handle. Yeah. For Ian, for example, we just got to the point where we had to start cutting back for a week or sometimes 5 days with the amount of food, because he wouldn't be able to handle all that food for so long. Yeah. Because your stomach, your appetite, it's just not possible. At one point, these large bodybuilders are double that requirement you were calculating. If you would use that calculation you were doing, mm-hmm. I was listening, I was like, this is you cannot do
it's
this
not
for
work,
these guys, because it would be double that much.
Well, just to be clear, I know those calorie calculators are not accurate, especially for guys like us. I was trying to show a baseline, and I was trying to just kind of illustrate what it might look like. And Hunter, for example, said that at 4,500 calories, he would start losing weight. So the way I calculated in my head was, okay, if at 4,500 he's starting to lose weight, if we add 500, that puts him at 5,000 for maintenance. And he said he was eating about 6,000. So I said, okay, you're eating about 1,000 calorie surplus. That was kind of my point, is a 300 to 500 calorie surplus is not enough to build the maximum amount of muscle in an off season. So that's kind of why I did what I did. I know it was a little off because of the calculator, but I still feel like it kind of proved what I was trying to say. Now, you're saying that their needs are even greater than 6,000, but they just can't get the calories in.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, you have to put all variables that go into a prep into account. I mean, the way you train, the way you eat, the type of supplement or drugs they use, everything plays a role in how much you're going to need. Mm-hmm. But again, these guys we're talking about, they are, the cream of the crop. They're exceptional human beings. Mm-hmm. And the amount of food that they need, with clean food, they couldn't even get fat, because there was this debate of getting fat. It's not even possible to get fat if you use, clean food sources, protein sources, carb sources, because they have reached such a metabolic rate, such an energy turnover that the limitation is not how much, it's just your stomach, your intestine, because you cannot handle more food. Okay. If we could find a way to add a second stomach, for example, these guys would keep growing.
Yeah. Okay. So let's bring it back to like a normal level. Since we're talking about it, let's bring it back to a normal level so that normal people, I say normal, forgive me for those of you who don't feel normal or do feel normal, but I'm going to say for the average person, let's say a 200-pound bodybuilder. Okay. Let's say 200-pound bodybuilder comes to you and says, Patrick, I want to get huge. I want to put on 10 pounds of muscle this year, or I want to put on 20 pounds of muscle this year, or whatever. I don't want to say what is correct. What is your opinion on how they should what should their off season look like? What do their calories look like? What does a surplus look like? That's all I'm trying to figure out, is because in my opinion, it's okay to gain a little bit of fat because we're going to be taking anabolics as we're dieting down. So we're going to be able to maintain the muscle while we're dieting. So why not bulk, put on the weight, and then maintain the muscle while you're losing some of the fat? But I'm not talking about getting super fat. I'm talking about like 12 to 15%. You know what I mean?
Well, you also take anabolics when you build your weight up.
Of course.
So you cannot use the equation, I'm going to use them when I diet down, so I'm not going to lose.
No. But I'm saying
the circumstances are going to be the same.
That's right. But what I'm saying is the argument I was going against was the argument is that bulking is bad because you're going to gain fat. And then when you try and strip away the fat, you're going to lose muscle at the same time. So at the end of the year, you're going to be the same size as the guy who didn't bulk at all. And in my opinion, I wouldn't have been this big as I am if I didn't bulk. That's all I was trying to, that was kind of my entire point. So I just kind of ask, and I'm not asking you to agree with me. I just want to know what your opinion is.
No, I agree on most of what you're saying because, anecdotally, that's what I've been seeing. So obviously what the difference between a 200-pound bodybuilder who wants to, reach 220 pounds, the biggest difference is that you're going to have to at one point push calories harder because you want to teach that body, you want to teach that person always to turn over more nutrients, because if he doesn't, get more, isn't able to turn over more nutrients, then he's going to get stuck at a certain point. And the only way to teach a body a metabolism to, increase its rate is to give more food than what it's needed. And sometimes you have to be really harsh with it. You can't just, add those 300 calories or more because the body will not feel that difference. You really have to force it sometimes, especially in your younger years, especially when you are those 200-pound bodybuilder.
Yeah.
You really have to have weeks where you really go overboard with the amount of calories. The trick is, and that's maybe where our approach differs, is that you can't do it for 2 years in a row, for 6 months even. You have to do it periodically. So you give a push, and you let even your body fat increase a little bit. But then before it gets overboard, you take a break. You come back down with the calories again, and then you give that push again. And over the period of time, these breaks that you give your body will always be shorter and less frequent. Sure. Whereas at the beginning, they will be more frequent because you're simply trying to teach your body to get accustomed to more nutrients. And same thing you do in the gym. If you always train with the weight or slightly more than what you're used to, it's very difficult to put on strength and then size. At one point, you really have to force it, especially strength-wise. You have to go in that zone where it's not comfortable, or sometimes you can't hold that weight. Or you force those negative, you force those reps. If you don't go through that, it will take much, much longer to get where you want to get. So
does everything you just said apply to only people on PEDs, or is that going to apply to a natural person that comes to you as well? Are you going to push them with the calories too?
Absolutely. Just the amount is going to be different. How strong you force a certain person into this metabolic state is obviously not as much as somebody who uses performance-enhancing drugs. But the process is the same. Protein synthesis is still going to be the same in a natural and an enhanced bodybuilder. Just, the speed of which you get there and how violently you can act upon this body is going to be different, but it's the same process.
Okay. So let me ask you, you touched on the training aspect, and that's kind of what I really want to get into today. But one of the things you just said was, once you reach to make the body grow, you're going to have to force it into a place it hasn't been, is pretty much what you were saying.
Exactly.
Is that why I've been around 250 to 260 pounds on stage pretty much the last 5 or 6 times I stepped on stage? Is that because I've kind of topped out my strength? Because I really don't my bench is pretty much 405. My squat is maxed out at 500. I don't generally I can't put 6 plates on a bar and squat it. I can't do 5 plates on a bench. Is that what I have to do to get that spark of growth that you've gotten out of your athletes?
Yes, absolutely. But you cannot use strength as the only measure, especially at the point of the career where you're at.
Yeah.
But a body is going to grow because it gets a certain stress it's not used to. And then adaptation, physiological adaptation is, new protein synthesis, cell proliferation, and trying to, make sure that the next time the stress comes, the body is ready for it. So if you're not putting in new stimulus or more stimulus, then there's no reason why you would grow. You could take all the drugs in the world. It's just not going to happen. So what you would need to do now is find something which is obviously not going to be weight, because you cannot use that amount of weight anymore, which can still increase the stress that you give your body and pretend a response from it. So that's where you have to get smart in your training and see that the metabolic part of your training is more important, which is going to force you at one point to introduce more food into your body to compensate from it.
Yeah.
And this again will increase your metabolic rate, will increase your overall performance in a different way than just, straight heavy resistance training.
Yeah.
But it's possible. That's absolutely possible.
And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to get into was, did you have a system called SST, or am I wrong about that? Okay. Can you explain what SST is?
Well, SST training, a lot of people get kind of confused with it for the S, which stands for sarcoplasma.
Okay.
I just use that sarcoplasma because that's the main difference between a power lifter and a bodybuilder. Why is a power lifter not as muscular as a bodybuilder, even though usually he's stronger? That's because the sarcoplasma is developed differently in a bodybuilder. You don't just have myofibrillar hypertrophy, which is, you break down a myofibril and you build it bigger. Yeah. You have this space around your muscle fiber, myofibrils, which is the reticulum sarcoplasmatic, this space, and this enlarges over time with a bodybuilder more than a powerlifter, because we use different techniques in training. We use more reps, we use more time under tension, we use more volume, and this is what causes this rounder, fuller look to the muscle. And my training system is simply a smart way. I'm not saying that I'm smart. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying
God forbid.
Intelligent.
God forbid you say you're smart. Anyway.
No, because then people say, "Oh, he said he's smart."
Okay, people are going to say it. So anyway, go on. It doesn't matter.
It's just a rational way of using time under tension with different techniques in the proper order to make the transition from myofibrillar hypertrophy, tensional heavy training, into this metabolic work. So I developed different techniques which you can use all these things that bodybuilders have always used, but use them in a correct way with the right order, going from tensional into metabolic work. And then you take these trainings or even sets on a small scale, you use a set as a measure, and on a big scale, you use your whole training. Yeah. And then you decide how much of this has to be heavy weight, anaerobic training, and how much has to be metabolic. Yeah. But I see a lot of people, for example, doing, one training 6 reps, then the next week they'll do 10 reps, and the next week they'll do 15 reps. And this way they say, I'm going to differentiate type of muscle fiber, type of stress, and this will, but biologically makes no sense.
You just described my training.
No, obviously it has some advantages with it, but you have to understand that all these variables have to be present at the same time to work. Yeah. So instead of measuring everything over your 3-week period, if you change every week your rep scheme, decide it in one training, or sometimes in one set, or from exercise to the other. How much of each are you going to do, depending on what you need to improve on? You need to be able to, you're a professional bodybuilder, you're eating 4,000 calories and getting fat, and you have a problem. Then we have to see that your training will allow us to have a higher nutrient turnover. So that's what we're going to push. Training is going to determine also how much food you can eat and how much calories you turn over. So use that to your advantage.
Okay.
So, and then you structure your training in function of that.
So
you use, yeah. So
no, I was just going to say that it's interesting because I know you said that the last time, but it's very, most guys don't look at their training as a way to increase calories. Most people, when they want to increase calories, say, oh, I'm going to do some cardio. And if I do some cardio, that means I can add, my appetite will get better and I can add some more food. Most people don't think if I train harder, I can add more food or my body will utilize more food. So
we need more food.
We need more food. You're right. Is there, let me ask you this. And I don't want to put, and I'll edit this part out if you want, but is there anywhere where I can see your program so we can give people an example of like one day or one body part or something, just so they know what you mean by all this? Because last time you called it the density of a set. You said
that's
that
one aspect.
Yeah, you said you don't always necessarily increase volume, but you increase density.
Yeah.
So I'm trying
to. It's very simple. If you do a certain amount of work, I mean, a certain amount of reps with a certain amount of weight, a certain amount of sets in a certain amount of time. Yeah. Excuse me for the certains. Now, you take all of this and you do it in less time, that's increased performance. That means your body has to work harder and the stress is going to be higher on it. So just by doing that.
But when you say that, most people think, well, I'll just take a shorter rest period. But that's not what your training is about, because I've talked to some people about it and it still escapes me. I don't know fully. I don't fully understand it, but there's a lot more to it than just shortening rest periods. Can you walk us through one set of like chest or legs or something? Can you walk us through one thing that, like, what it would look like?
I usually do seminars about this. Would take 8 hours of time, but
can you condense it?
Yeah, I'm going to make it very simple. One thing the bodybuilders have to understand when they differentiate, tensional work to metabolic work, why doesn't it work as well if you divide it in week periods? Is because the most important factor is this transition that you have going from tensional work into metabolic work. That's why, every bodybuilder knows rest pauses, stripping sets, things like that.
Yeah.
They work very well because of this aspect.
Okay.
So you have to analyze and see, when I go from very heavy to more metabolic, more time under tension work, what is the most important aspect is ATP resynthesis. That means that you are going biochemically. What happens in your muscle is totally different. Okay. The reaction you will get from this type of stress is going to be different than just, straight heavy sets. Yeah. Or if you just do 15 or 20 reps by itself. Okay. So once you have reached failure in that with your heavy anaerobic work, and you don't let ATP resynthesis in, and you keep working in a certain manner, this will cause this extra stress to your muscle cell and this sarcoplasmic adaptation. Okay. So when you construct a training or a set, you do it in function of your strength and your weaknesses. Mm-hmm. Let's take, for example, James. When we started working together, he was strong as hell. He still is. Yeah. And he has mostly been working this way. So for me, it was clear. I mean, it was just so easy to see, hey, James, we're going to start to still train heavy, still have those, important lifts, but over a whole training session, the amount of these that you're going to do will be probably 1/3 less than before, just 1/3, 30% of what it was before. And we're going to add in every exercise that you do, something, and this something depends on who you are. So you cannot give, a specific guideline for everybody, but in function of what we wanted to do. So the first thing, when I saw his diet, I said, oh, you need to eat more. Yeah. So we increase calories probably
but wait, sorry, can I interrupt for 1 second? So you said you need to eat more, but this was before you had changed his training already. So like
this went together. This went together.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to ask you is, how does somebody know when they're supposed to increase the food? Like if you did them at the same time, how did you know his body would be ready for having more food? You just
Because you can ask James, because the amount of work he was doing in the gym was probably about 3 times more.
But it's that instant. Like if you start today doing that type of work, you're going to instantly need more food.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Obviously, the efficiency in which you are going to take up this food is not immediate.
Yeah.
Because your stomach, your intestines, also your performance in the gym needs more time.
Sure.
It's not like I'm going to, make an SST set for you, and then the first time you do it, that's it. I mean, you're good at it. You're not.
Yeah.
It probably took James 3 to 4 workouts from the same muscle group before he really got to the point where also the metabolic work, he was able to use more weight.
Okay.
Because the goal is not to use, pussy weights to start, using 30-40% of your max. The purpose is to be able to do metabolic work, but still with an important amount of weight. That is where you're really going to start to look freakish. But when you have somebody with Jane's strength or Ian's strength, if you are able to add some more stress, metabolic stress, and keep that stress relatively heavy, then you can really see this physique blossom. And plus you're adding in usually more carbs, a little bit more protein, but mainly more carbs, and you just take this look to another level.
So let's assume that let's just use an example. So I know one of the ways you described increasing the density of a set was increasing the length of the set without increasing the time was with cluster sets, right? You said that was one technique, right? So let's just use that technique. If I'm doing 4 exercises in a workout, am I doing one of those intensity techniques for every single exercise, or are you picking specific exercises to do them with?
Usually when you do some metabolic work, you want to do it at the beginning of your training, not at the end of the training. That's what most bodybuilders have been doing for 30 years. At the end of your workout, what you do a pump.
Yeah.
But it makes no sense then, because you're working on the depleted glycogen stores. You're trying to put blood in where you have been depleted.
Okay.
So it's not really efficient. You really want the blood to go in there strongly.
Yeah.
And that has to be at the beginning of the training, and just add it to your heavyweight. And that's where you're the strongest, the beginning of your training. So we would try to make always the first exercise the heaviest exercise, usually, unless you start with a pre-exhausting movement, but that's another story. Yeah. So you'd really make your basic compound movement at the beginning, get in those heavy reps, and then depending on where we are with the prep, add in some more metabolic work. That could be a cluster set, for example. That could be, for example, a set where you emphasize the negative part, so you have a little rest pause, and then you slow down the eccentric part of the movement. Yeah. You reduce the weight, you slow down the concentric part. Just any type, not really any type, but whatever can add a different type and amount of stress to that specific muscle cell you're trying to train.
Okay. And those two things in combination, those kind of extended sets or metabolic sets, as you call them, in combination with the extra food, is what's giving your guys this look. What is the training also being like that is what's causing them to stay lean with that amount of food?
I have to be honest and say not everybody trains. There are some bodybuilders I have that they prefer to, keep training the way they are. So what I do is I give some guidelines, maybe in terms of volume, amount of exercises you want to do. So I have an idea with the nutrition, how we have to balance it out.
Yeah.
Some athletes really don't need that, extra specific look like we're talking about these very high level bodybuilders, because you still haven't maxed out on your strength. So there's still a lot of work to do there. So what I do is I give more guidelines, but always with exactly what you said in mind, that we need to be able to have more food.
Yeah.
Obviously, a 20-year-old bodybuilder weighing 200 pounds, the training is not going to be very metabolic, because you need to. So it's progressive overload. Usually also the frequency of the trainings are not going to be weekly, maybe every 9-10 days. So
Yeah.
strength is really maximized. But again, it really depends on what stage of development you are and what we really have to do to take it to the next level. What I was telling you before, going from 290 pounds to 300 with lean tissue is one thing. Going from 200 to 210 is a totally different other ball game. So you're going to have to, prioritize certain things.
Yeah. Do you mind? Are you okay with covering some PEDs for a little bit before we wrap up?
There's no secrets.
Okay.
I wish there was.
Question. So the first question that comes to mind is insulin. Well, what is your stance on insulin? How do you like to use it? What is it even part of your program? Like, what is your thoughts on that?
Yes, it can be. It not always is. In the off season for very large bodybuilders, again, probably we use a little bit, sometimes before a training, a little bit after the training, but really depends, not always. Yeah. Sometimes just for muscle body parts that we want to really help come up more than others. So prioritize certain muscles. So, but usually I never am a fan of giving more than 4 or 5, maybe 6 units at a time.
Yeah.
And I always make sure that the amount of carbs that you are getting will be higher than what the insulin, exogenous insulin, can cover. So your body is still producing insulin. With the exogenous insulin, especially in the post-training, 4 or 5 units, will give you a faster insulin peak than your endogenous, because you put your food in, it has to be digested, assimilated, glucose from intestine goes into your blood. So to have an insulin spike, sometimes it takes a little longer. It's not as strong. Yeah. If you take exogenous insulin post-training with a really fast-acting carb like cyclodextrin, something like that, you really cover that much faster. Now, we can debate, is it really necessary? Probably not, because as you know, protein synthesis is something that will be increased for many, many hours post-training. Yeah. But insulin is very anti-catabolic. I would say more than anabolic, it has a strongly anti-catabolic effect, which is extremely important after training because it stops protein degradation. So if you don't feed your body post-training after you injured it during training, your body will start feeding on itself,
Okay.
So you lose amino acids instead of building them. So if you can stop that little window of, the body destructing, then obviously you start the anabolic process sooner. So that's the theory behind it.
So is it more important than you think? Because some people say if I take my insulin pre-working out, I'm going to get a crazy pump and I'm going to uptake whatever nutrients I have in my intra-workout powder. If I take an intra-workout with essentials or whatever, I'm going to uptake all those nutrients better. And then some people say, no, like you say, take it after and kind of get that uptake of all the nutrients right when you're done training. If I could only pick one, are you saying it's more important to get it in post than pre?
If I have to choose, absolutely it's post, because that's when you repair, that's when you grow. Insulin is not going to be that help or any help in terms of strength and performance during training. So you can just simply use carb sources before training and still have your endogenous insulin do just as all the work that is needed. Sometimes I use insulin like 45 minutes before training with some carbs, but it's going to be something solid like toast and jam or rice cakes and jam, something like that. But we're talking again, not when you weigh 200 pounds, but when you weigh 290 pounds and you have a SST leg training in front of you, believe me, you're going to be happy that you have these extra carbs being shuttled a little strongly, but not too close to your training.
Sorry, that's what I was going to ask you. And I'm sorry I keep interrupting, but you keep just bringing more questions up, so I want to get them in before we go. So most coaches or even, guys in the gym will say, 5 IUs right before you start training and then drink like a carb source, like a cluster dextrin, or you don't believe any of that will help anything.
Most of the time you feel worse. You feel lethargic.
Yeah.
And the amount of carbs you have to use intra-training to cover that will not make you feel well and absolutely not improve your performance. Maybe your pump, if you train lightly or something like that, I can see it work,
Yeah.
but not if you're doing a real bodybuilding training.
So
I would use 4 or 5 units, maybe 45 minutes latest before a training.
yeah.
But always make sure you have a little complex carbs, fast absorbing, like rice cakes, for example, or just simply toast, that will give you a more steady glucose release.
Okay.
And then intra-training, simply add maybe a little bit of cyclic dextrin, but we're talking 10, 20 grams, something like that, with a little extra potassium, like coconut water or something, just to keep the mineral balance also
So
during training.
basically, hostile supplements, intra R3 powder is what you're talking about.
What does it contain?
exactly what you just said. It contains about 20 grams of cluster dextrin and 8 grams of essential aminos, and it contains the coconut water and potassium and all the electrolytes.
Awesome.
So
Sounds
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Sounds really good.
Anyway, just my own little plug, but okay, so that covers insulin. That's actually a lot of valuable information.
I need to get paid for that one.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give you a royalty. No, that's a lot of really, really good information because I've never heard that before. Most honestly, and I've worked with a lot of different coaches and I've talked to a lot of different coaches, a lot of different pros, and most everybody says 5-IU, a carb powder, and then go work out. And I've experienced what you're talking about. I've experienced that. I'm not a big fan of insulin, but when I did do it, I've experienced that kind of lethargic, bloated stomach because I drank too many carbs. I had to drink 100 grams of carbs while I was training. It's not really ideal. I think I would rather do it your way. It sounds like it makes a little bit more sense. So
all I can say is I didn't get to this, because you read it somewhere, is because of 25 years trying every possible way, just like you said. And, from deduction, that's where I found the best balance. Obviously, even 45 to an hour before, there are people who don't experience this great well-being, but I would say probably 75% of the large athletes that I coach are fine with it. And then another thing, don't do it, systematically before every workout. Because again, your body, like everything you do, will get accustomed to it and it will not react as well to it anymore. So just find moments, maybe 2-3 weeks, or maybe certain trainings that you specifically want to improve anabolism around where you're going to do it. Don't just think, oh, I'm going to do everything, for my biceps, for my triceps, use insulin before you train arms. I mean, this doesn't make any sense.
Well, what if you have weak, you said do it before weak body parts. So what if you have weak arms? Then you have to do it before, you have to do it before arms.
Usually with the right nutrient timing and your own insulin for a small muscle group, you have not that amount of blood circulating. It will do just fine. EAS and cyclic dextrin at the right time will just do everything to the maximum. Just if you train back, if you train legs, maybe heavy chest workout, there's a different amount of effort going into energy expenditure and amount of muscle tissue that is stimulated. So there is a little different metabolic state that you're in compared to just training maybe your calves or your arms, something small like that.
What's your stance on growth hormone? Is it as important as some people make it seem, or is it kind of an afterthought? Because I feel like it's an important part of what we do, but I've heard the opposite from people too. So
my opinion is that it's probably the most important hormone ever for a bodybuilder.
Okay.
I would rather take very few steroid hormones like testosterone derivatives, but GH than just a lot of steroids and no GH. Absolutely.
Sure.
You just have a cell proliferation. You have more IGF-1, which will give you more muscle cells to work on. And I would even say for beginners, that's a good way to use less amount of steroids. So obviously you don't need that much. I'm talking about 2-3 IUs, something like that. Cycle it. Don't be on it all the time. because again, if you stay on it for 20 years and higher amounts, it impacts your thyroid function or insulin sensitivity. So you have to, make sure that you know how to use it, especially if you are using above 4 or 5 IUs a day. Your insulin production needs to be really up there. So make sure you have plenty of carbs in your diet. Don't, take 16 IUs a day and diet on 50 grams of carbs a day, because you're going to be insulin resistant and have thyroid problems. Absolutely.
But I just, like I said, again, this is just from experience, but I have done diets that are very low in calories, low in carbs, but the growth hormone keeps my body looking full, even in like a big deficit. So how do you reconcile that? Like, when somebody says, well, it's keeping me really full and I'm eating little calories, so I'm able to lose a lot of fat and still maintain my look.
I think when your carbs are very low, believe me, there is no difference between using 4 IUs or 8 IUs.
Okay.
You can measure that by just simply measuring your IGF-1 levels, because you take, for example, 2 IUs, your IGF-1 will be at a certain level. You take 4, you still have an increase, but not proportionally. It won't be double.
Oh, I see.
You take 6 IUs, you still have a little increase. But the higher you get, at a certain point, your body will not be able to keep producing more IGF-1. And the higher your IGF-1 level gets, the more it binds to certain specific proteins and it deactivates. So specifically when you are low in carbs and your insulin levels are very low, it just doesn't metabolize well, or not metabolize, not the right word, but it's not converted well into growth factors, because you need insulin, you need substrates in your blood in order for it to be maximized. You need thyroid hormones, you need insulin, you need testosterone. When all of these, you need, specific amount of thyroid hormone, that's the most important. So if you have a low thyroid function and you have very high GH, you just make everything worse. Your prolactin levels have to be low also. So for example, when you use Trenbolone or certain nandrolones and you have higher prolactin levels, this will also inhibit
your GH production,
growth factors. Growth factor like IGF-1 production. So the more is not the better. You always have to see metabolically where you're at, and then don't think that by using 16 IUs you'll get leaner faster than using 4 IUs if you're eating no carbs, for example, because you just accelerate the problems.
So when you say 4 IUs, are we talking about like somebody average who's come to you, or are you talking about? And I don't want you to say any names, but like, we'll use me for example. If I come to you and I say, how much GH should I use? Are you saying 4 to 6? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I have, in the off season, I have never had any athlete use more than 6 IUs. Most of the time, 4 or 5. 6 is the highest I can go, because simply I've seen so many blood tests, blood work done on IGF-1 levels, and I've never one time seen more IGF-1, over 400, for example, with 12 IUs compared to, for example, 4 or 5 IUs. It just doesn't happen. So more than thinking about how much you have to use, you have to make sure that everything else, all other hormones and your nutrition, is so well balanced that you maximize those 4 IUs. Also, when you take those 4 IUs will make a difference. If you take them, 4 IUs before you go to sleep and you haven't had carbs in 4 hours, the stimulation your liver get in certain specific muscle tissue is going to be totally different than if you take it, for example, after a rich carbohydrate meal. So timing is important with exogenous growth hormone, and all other hormones that you use at the same time have to be at a certain level and balance to really optimize what growth hormone can do.
So when someone says Big Ramy must be taking 20 IUs of GH and that's why he looks the way he looks, that's probably nonsense.
Total nonsense.
Yeah. Okay.
I've known Big Ramy for many years, and I can assure you, he has never taken that much. I don't know lately, but from what I have been talking to him, no, absolutely not.
So you mentioned timing, but you also mentioned this is the confusing part for me, because I've heard so many conflicting things, right? Some people say, well, your blood sugar has to be at its lowest to get the biggest benefit from GH. Like I had a coach once, he used to tell me, take it at night before bed. Then I had another coach tell me, no, take it in the morning when you wake up. Then I had another coach tell me, break it up, take half in the morning, half after you work out. Like what is ideal and why?
Well, Fouad, I don't think is a matter of opinion. This is science. This is medicine.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
It is a fact that when you have growth hormone and insulin and nutritional substrates in your blood plus other hormones at the same time, your liver is stimulated much to a greater extent to produce growth factors. That's period. That's it.
Okay.
Now, if you want, for example, to use growth hormone and maximize fatty acids, to use fatty acids as energy purposes, which growth hormone can also help you do that, then you would probably use it when no insulin and glucose are present in the blood. So you would take it fast before a cardio.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with that most of the time is, why would I spend so much money, trying to burn a little bit more fat, which I can do with other things, which don't cost that much.
Yeah.
And if I maximize my IGF-1 production, IGF-1 in itself is going to help me to use more fatty acids as energy, so it will help you also get lean. At the same time, you also have to know that we cannot have insulin and GH always present at the same time, over a chronic period of time, because this desensibilizes your receptors, growth hormone and insulin receptors, because this is a metabolic state which is totally not natural. They're antagonistic hormones. They're always naturally, when one is present, the other one isn't. So when insulin levels are low, the body can produce growth hormone and vice versa. So if you're forcing this mechanism every day, 3-4 times a day, you're going to have problems. So my suggestion is use at both times, like one of your coaches was saying, use it in the morning. Make sure you have amino acids, especially essential amino acids, with it when you're using it, at least that.
Yeah.
And then use it, for example, post-training, when then you're going to have a little insulin and a lot of carbs coming in. So you have both sides of what a growth hormone can do, and you're still trying to maximize IGF-1 output.
Okay. As far as anti-estrogens, I feel like a lot of people go wrong here, because a lot of people I've heard of a lot of people taking a lot of anti-estrogens to help harden up their physiques or dry out their physiques or whatever. But I also feel like it limits muscle size, like the roundness and fullness of the muscle, I feel is affected by too many anti-estrogens. So what is like your anti-estrogen of choice, and how would you use it?
Well, if you use we have to differentiate from SERM to aromatase inhibitors. For example, from tamoxifen, Nolvadex to anotrozole, letrozole, or exemestane, they're different. One inhibits a specific enzyme which converts testosterone or testosterone derivatives into estradiol, and the other one just acts upon the receptor sites and blocks what estrogen is trying to signal.
Sure.
So I never like to use SERM like Nolvadex, simply only PCT, because the way it acts on your LH and FSH levels. But sorry,
it's okay.
My battery. Specifically, you have to see how much of drugs that you're using that convert to estrogen. So how high are your doses?
Yeah.
Then usually, if you use an aromatase inhibitor, you really don't need that much to have physiological levels of estrogen, because you never really want to suppress estrogen completely.
Yeah.
Then you have to also, especially in the off season. Now, pre-contest is a different animal, but still, estrogen has its role. You just have to control it, not suppress it.
Sure.
You don't need to suppress it.
Yeah.
The higher your aromatase inhibitors are, then the lower certain minerals are looped back in the kidneys. So that's why you get flat faster.
Okay.
And it also inhibits, for example, things like growth factor production when your estrogen is too low. So again, it's a matter of balance. Obviously, with high amounts of steroid hormones, especially those aromatizing, you need a little bit, because many people tend to really convert a lot.
Yeah.
Then another aspect is how much body fat are you carrying? How much fats are you eating?
It's true too.
Especially
Yeah.
if your body fat is very high, specifically around your midsection, certain specific fat tissues in your body, then the higher your conversion rate is going to be. So that's another reason, for example, to stay lean.
Sure.
You want to have low body fat levels because your testosterone, your free testosterone is going to be higher than the conversion rate you have from estrogen. But my take on aromatase inhibitor is the least amount possible, because again, it affects your fullness, it affects mineral loop back in your kidneys, and you need a certain amount of estrogen to function properly, to be full. Also, when you go on stage, I see people using 3 different aromatase inhibitors, the week before the show. Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. You don't need that. You don't need that.
I've been there. I used to, I worked with a coach a long time ago that had me on Arimidex, Letrozole, and Nolvadex all at once.
Yeah, I've seen that before.
I know who it is. I couldn't get off the couch. I couldn't get off my couch. Like I'd be sitting there after a meal and I'd have to go to the bathroom, for example. I couldn't get up to go to the bathroom.
But see Fouad, Arimidex, anastrozole is aromatase inhibitor. So this enzyme that should convert is already suppressed. Letrozole is exactly the same thing. It's just another company producing it.
Oh, okay.
Why do we have
pointless.
to? It's because these 2 companies both wanted to have an anti-cancer medicine. So one produced letrozole, the other one produced anastrozole, but they have exactly the same therapeutic purpose in your body. So if you take both of them, then it just doesn't make any sense.
So that's funny.
You can maybe take a little more of one. Then on top of that, you're taking tamoxifen, which blocks the receptor site. But if you already have suppressed your estrogen to almost nothing, why do you also add in your tamoxifen? It's just a big soup and just throw in everything and say something is going to work.
Yeah. Well, I guess, that's what happens. I was just listening to my coach, you know what I mean? And plus I always thought in the general consensus is that letrozole is different than Arimidex. Most people feel much worse when they take letrozole than they take Arimidex. It's surprising to think that they're the exact same.
I mean, they have the same therapeutic purpose. They're both used for the same exact thing, but obviously they have a little different reactions from the body. For example, letrozole, I've seen with a lot of athletes having a little more problems with tendons, joints. It can cause little more problems there.
Sure.
Arimidex usually affects mineral loop back stronger than letrozole, so you flatten out usually fast. But again, it's subjective. It's not for everybody, but most people. So you flatten more with Arimidex than with letrozole. And my favorite, which I've seen the least side effects from this, is aromazine, is exemestane. It's usually what most people tolerate. The only negative part about it is that it needs a little more than from the other 2. So if you take 1 pill of Arimidex, 1 milligram, usually 1 pill of 25 milligrams of aromazine will not exactly inhibit aromatase the same way. You just probably need a little more. But what you do is take half of Arimidex every other day and 1 aromazine. But that we're talking about extremely high doses. Usually 1 of every day or every other day is more than enough, even if on peak week.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to know I'm not crazy, because I'm like, I know you're saying letrozole is the same company, and I'm like, as Arimidex, I'm like,
different companies,
but it does
same purpose.
But it feels different in the body.
Yes,
correct?
It does. You're right.
Okay. That's all. I just want to make sure I'm not nuts.
That's why off season we try not to use letrozole.
Oh, I would never do that. The only time I've used letrozole is like the last week before a show. But like I said, it's kind of redundant considering all the other things I was using. So how many guys you got? You have Ian, James, and Florian. And I don't want you to have to pick between your clients, because I don't know if any of them listen to this podcast, but are you expecting anybody to go to the Olympia this year? All of them? Some of them? Like, whose plans?
Florian is not competing before the final date for this year.
Okay.
But I'm expecting Florian to be at Olympia next year.
Why?
Absolutely.
Okay, 1 second. Florian looks like he's 8 weeks out. Why is he not competing?
We're going to compete in November.
Okay. Why not? It's totally
because we wanted to compete before. We wanted to compete in July, actually, at the Portugal.
Yeah.
But during the COVID, he was not able to train very well, so we came off everything for almost 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to train properly. So he's just now getting back in the groove and really start growing again. So I don't want to interrupt that. He still needs to make some gains. And I think we still have another 4 to 6 weeks where he can really push the calories before we anyway have to cut back. So that's why we look at November shows.
And Ian is competing in 10 days. You expect him to go to the Olympia, hopefully?
And that's the plan. We're not going there to be second. Yeah.
And then James is competing in Spain, October.
Yep. Yes.
Anybody else you have making an Olympia run?
Joe Seaman, I've been coaching for a few weeks now.
What's he getting ready for?
Those California Pro.
When's that?
It's 7 weeks now, 7 or 8.
Okay.
8, 7, yeah, 7 weeks, I think.
He looks good.
And those pictures don't do him justice. Those are empty stomach and post cardio pics. He's coming along very well. He's still 280 some pounds, and he's leaning out, not losing any weight. He's going to look improved from last year, where he already was very, very good.
Yeah. What about Nicolas? Anything for him this year?
Oh yeah, he's doing the Spain show, doing the 212.
Oh, okay. He looks really impressive, especially with the stomach control he has now is very, very nice to see.
Yeah, he looks really good. Good.
I'm very happy. Can he teach me how to do this?
Well, you have to ask Nicolas.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Can he teach me how to do this? I call him and say.
Well, he came off performance enhancing drug for 1 year completely. I only ate a maximum of 3 meals a day for 1 year total. So, that really reset everything. Then when we started back, we really went much, much lower with with drugs that we have used.
Yeah.
Before, I mean, really low. If I would tell you a cycle, you probably won't believe me. And that's helped him, stay that way he is now.
Is that how he did that? He just kind of reset his stomach with a year of eating very little.
Yeah. Exactly, year, and staying off drugs, staying off everything, and very light training. So I mean, he lost probably 30 pounds of muscle.
And then he put it all back on, but not on his stomach.
It took 9 months for it. He came back slowly, step by step. It wasn't, something he really bounced back in.
How old is he?
So he's 28.
Oh, so he had the time to take a couple of years off and really reset everything.
Yeah.
It's funny you said that because Ben Pekulski at the last year of his career really changed his shape. I don't know if you remember that, but he was able to do some stomach vacuums and everything. And I know his secret to that was really reducing his food quite a bit. And he lost some muscle in the process, but at the same time, he was able to really start pulling the vacuums in, and it made his physique look a lot better.
Yeah, it takes time, Fouad. It takes time.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's the time. Do you think the time without reducing the food works? Because I feel like reducing the food is one of the main pieces of the equation.
But it's not going to do it if you do it for a few weeks. It really it's going to take a long time.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying what I'm asking you is, can you do it without reducing? If I'm eating 4,000 calories a day and trying to pull vacuums every morning, is that going to be? Is it going to work?
It will take longer. I think the most important aspect is also drugs and lose muscle tissue. Everything around your midsection, you still have muscle.
Okay.
Your abs, your intercostals, your obliques, you have to lose everything. So you're going to lose chest, biceps, legs, and those muscles. And then when you come back, you just make sure not to, stimulate them again.
Wow.
Or less.
Yeah, that sounds like an impossible task at this point. Okay. I've had you on for a while. What time is it there? It's 11:30?
11:20. I'm in Rome right now.
Anything? Do you live in Rome? Is that where you are?
My wife is from Rome.
Oh, okay.
But we have to come down every once in a while to see our parents, and
Oh, I see.
so that's yeah.
Anything you want to plug, promote? Anything you want to say before we head off for today?
Not really. I just, I really, really appreciate, having me on and talking to you. And I want to apologize again for our little scratch we had,
Please don't.
About that cheat meal. I probably have Swiss sarcasm, and
no,
you took it the wrong way. And it was
I did.
my bad.
You know what? It's a funny thing. I get a little sensitive sometimes because I read so much. A lot of bodybuilders don't answer their comments. They don't even look at their comments, right?
Yeah.
And I try and answer everybody. So it's a catch-22 because you're trying to answer like 90% of nice people, and you have to read 10% of people that hate you. So sometimes it gets to you. And when I saw your comment, I was probably just already in one of those moods. But trust me, man, I apologize for even saying anything. I knew it was a joke. I probably just took it the wrong way. So,
but I still think it. Just that you know, I still think that. I still think
Patrick, I am going to disagree with you 100% on this. I don't. Okay,
I'm not going to give you this one.
No,
I still think that
we're going to forever agree to disagree. And for those of you who didn't watch the first podcast, Patrick called me a pussy because I said I like to have one cheat meal a week, which I don't think is like. I don't think it's crazy.
There's difference between liking and needing.
Wait a minute. Let's rewind. I don't need a cheat meal.
Yes.
That's not what I meant. I didn't mean I need it. If I'm working with a coach and the coach says to me, "You're not cheating. We're not cheating," then if I believe in what we're doing, like for example, when I work with Hani, me and Hani work together. I think I had one cheat meal in 16 weeks.
See, Hani knows his shit.
Yeah, he does know shit. But what I'm saying is I believed in what we were doing and it was working. And I was like, okay, fuck it. It's just, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to have a cheat meal. But I also have worked with John when I won 2 pro shows. And I think I looked my biggest and most conditioned. And we did cheats every other week.
I'm not arguing that you can't have them. I'm not arguing that even if you have some cheat meals, you still can look great.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if you need them, you are a little sissy.
Okay, then we're in agreement. Then we both agree then, because I never said need. I said, like for example, right now I'm doing my my diet and I'm very strict with it. But Saturday night I have one meal and I've been doing like homemade burgers with no cheese and like a sweet potato or something on the side.
That's not even a cheat meal.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's not like I'm going to get pizza.
But that's not a cheat meal. That's just different macros. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, I consider anything that's not in my boring ass diet a cheat meal. So last Saturday I had 2 burgers and I had like a huge bowl of fruit and some other shit, and it was good enough. It just kind of resets my head, right? So, but I don't need it. So let's just now we're in agreement. See.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, and as far as the barbecue sauce, I want to ask you about this. I found it funny because you're like, don't use the barbecue sauce. And I'm like, but you tell guys they can use jam after their workouts. And I'm like, I only use the barbecue sauce post-workout. There's not really any difference between the jam and the barbecue sauce.
Well, it is. That's corn syrup. It's a little different source of sugar. It's really bad sugar in there. But really? I mean, the jam and the rice cakes, they are counted in the total amount of carbs that we use during the day. Your sauce is just extra to what you're taking.
I factored in.
Then okay. I just think that, look at the composition, what type of sugars are in there. They're not really.
I actually never considered that. I never considered that. I figured, yeah, you know what? I never considered that. I figured they're both just glucose. It's not a big deal.
Corn syrup usually.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. Well, it doesn't matter.
It's really bad sugar.
I've cut it out anyway. I haven't had any a couple weeks because of you. Thank you very much.
Use some Cholula sauce.
I got to find out what that is. I use the Frank's Red Hot.
Yeah, hot sauce that has a thermogenic effect on you.
Yeah, that's what the other thing too is I normally don't start my diet till 12 weeks out. So the first 4 weeks, like the 16 to 12, now I'm just under 12, but the first 4 weeks is more just cutting out all the junk food and being like strict that way. And then I cut out things as I go. Like it gets harder and harder as the week. Now I'm 12 weeks out. There's no more barbecue sauce. There's no more anything. It's very, very
If you would start earlier, you could eat more food. At the end, you would still eat a greater amount of food than if you would only do it in 12 weeks.
You can't give me anything. You're like, just fucking, just like always have an answer.
I'm sorry. That's
you know what? I like it. I like it. It's okay. It's valuable.
Would you rather 2 weeks before the show eat an average of 4,500 calories or 2,500 calories? Well, and do 4 more weeks at the beginning.
I don't think the barbecue sauce made that much difference.
No, I'm not talking about the barbecue. I'm talking about that the first 4 weeks are just.
No. They're still very strict. The only difference really between the first 4 weeks and now is I'm having a little less sweeteners in my like oatmeal, and I cut the barbecue sauce. That's really it. There wasn't very much difference. It's just I was a little free with the barbecue sauce and the ketchup.
You don't have 20 pounds to lose. You're already pretty lean, so.
Yeah, I think it's weird though. I'm like I said, I'm 280. I think I'll still get down to like 250 by the time I'm ready.
Yeah, probably, but you also have. Sorry.
It's okay. I know your battery's going to die. We're going to go.
You have to also see how much of that is water. Most of it is going to be water weight. Yeah. You don't have to lose, 30 pounds of fat.
I usually consider 10 pounds of it water and the other 20 fat. Does that make sense?
Progressive. I don't see 20 pounds of fat on your body.
That's because I'm good at hiding it with the angles.
Okay.
Anyway.
20 pounds of fat, that's like 10%.
Yeah, I think I'm about 10% now.
Yeah, but you're not going to go down to 0. You're going to go down to probably 5-6%, something like that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Anyway, we'll see.
We'll see.
Patrick, I appreciate you very much coming on and explaining some more of your theories. We will do it again, of course. And don't make fun of me too much online.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to show people the response I got from you. It's like,
just if leave it alone.
If I was in the room next to you, probably would have shot me with a gun or something like that. So, don't touch Fouad. I mean,
All right. We'll just keep it to ourselves. Yeah. I don't want anybody to know. No okay. Thank you very much, sir. I will see you again. All right, brother.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Fouad. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, share with your friends, and like the video. And if you get a chance, check out the description for all the different links to all the different places you can find Hostile and myself. And lastly, check out hostile.com for our new line of supplements and all of our apparel and gear. Thanks again for watching.